There are moments in life that defy all logic, moments where reality bends, where time seems to pause, and where something unexplainable reaches through the fabric of the ordinary to save you from catastrophe. What you're about to hear is not fiction. It's not a tale spun from imagination. This is about the night a stranger grabbed your arm on a cold street corner, looked into your eyes with an intensity that froze your blood, and whispered words that would save your life. "Don't go home tonight." You laughed it off, you pulled away, but something in his voice, something in the way the universe seemed to hold its breath in that moment, made you hesitate. 6 hours later, your house was engulfed in flames. Everything you owned, every memory, every possession turned to ash at exactly 3 a.m. But you weren't there. You were alive because somehow, impossibly, a homeless man you'd never met knew what was coming. Today, we're going into the mystery of impossible warnings, the hidden signals the universe sends before disaster strikes, and the unexplainable connections between strangers that save lives. This isn't just a story, it's a pattern that's been documented thousands of times across history, and if you've ever experienced something similar, you need to understand what it means. Before we begin, if you've ever received a warning that saved your life, or if you've ever had an unexplainable feeling that kept you from danger, type "saved" in the comments. That acknowledgement isn't just for the algorithm, it's an energetic recognition that you're tuned into frequencies most people ignore. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because what we're about to reveal will change how you see coincidence, intuition, and the invisible threads that connect us all. Now, let's go back to that street corner. Let's understand what really happened. It was 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. Nothing special about the day. You'd worked late, grabbed takeout, and were walking the 3 blocks home like you had 1,000 times before. The streets were mostly empty. A few cars passed. The air had that autumn chill that makes you walk faster. Then you saw him, sitting against the brick wall of a closed bookstore, wrapped in layers of worn clothing, a man who looked like he'd been forgotten by the world. Most people walked past without a glance, but as you approached, he stood up. Not slowly, not casually. He stood with purpose, with urgency, and before you could process what was happening, his hand shot out and gripped your wrist. His eyes were clear. That's what you remember most, not clouded by substances, not vacant or distant, crystal clear and piercing, like he could see straight through your skin into something deeper. "Don't go home tonight," he said. His voice didn't waver. It wasn't a request or a suggestion. It was a command delivered with absolute certainty. You tried to pull away, confused, maybe a little frightened. "What? Let go of me!" But he held firm for just another second, his gaze locked onto yours. "I'm serious. Don't go home. Not tonight. Promise me." Then he released you, stepped back and sat down again, as if the conversation had never happened. "It's all right. This is hard." Your heart was racing, your mind was spinning with questions. How did he know where you lived? Was he threatening you? Was this some kind of setup? You looked around for anyone else, any sign of danger, but the street was empty. Just you and this stranger who delivered an impossible warning. Most people would have dismissed it completely, chalked it up to a random encounter with someone unstable, but something stopped you from doing that. Something in your gut, some ancient survival instinct that humans have learned to ignore in modern times, was screaming at you to listen. So you made a choice that would save your life. You didn't go home. You called a friend, made up an excuse about being locked out, asked if you could crash on their couch. They said yes. You grabbed some toiletries from a convenience store and headed across town. The whole time, part of your brain was mocking you for taking the word of a homeless stranger seriously. But another part, the part that operates on instinct rather than logic, felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Like you just stepped out of the path of something terrible. You tried to sleep that night but couldn't shake the feeling that something massive had just shifted in your reality. Then, at 3:47 a.m., your phone exploded with notifications, messages, calls, alerts, your neighbor's name flashing across the screen. You answered, and the words came through like a hammer to your chest. "Your house is on fire. The whole building. It started in your unit. The fire marshal said it started in the walls, old wiring that had been degrading for years, finally reaching the point of catastrophic failure. The flames spread with terrifying speed, consuming your apartment in minutes. Your bedroom, where you would have been sleeping at exactly 3 a.m., was the epicenter. The heat was so intense that metal fixtures melted. The smoke was so thick that anyone inside would have been unconscious within seconds. If you had been home, if you had ignored that warning, you would have died. Not maybe, not possibly, you would have died. Standing outside the smoking ruins the next morning, watching firefighters pour water onto what used to be your life, you felt a strange mixture of emotions. Grief for everything you'd lost, absolutely, but also something else. Something profound and unsettling. Gratitude mixed with existential confusion, because the mathematics of what had just happened didn't add up in any rational way. A stranger, with no apparent connection to you, no way of knowing anything about your life, had warned you mere hours before a fire that investigators confirmed was caused by an electrical failure that had been building for months, maybe years. How? How could he possibly have known? You went back to that street corner 3 days later, the spot where he'd grabbed your wrist and changed your fate. You needed answers. You needed to thank him, to understand, to make sense of the impossible. But he wasn't there. You asked the shop owners nearby. You described him. You came back multiple times over the following weeks. No one had seen him. No one knew who you were talking about. He had appeared at the exact moment you needed him, delivered a message that saved your life, and then vanished like smoke. Like he'd never existed at all, except you knew he had. Your survival was proof. This is where most people try to rationalize. They create explanations that fit inside the boundaries of acceptable reality. Maybe he'd seen smoke earlier. Maybe he'd noticed something wrong with the building. Maybe it was just an incredible coincidence that his random warning happened to align with an actual disaster. But those explanations crumble under scrutiny. There was no smoke, no visible damage, no reason for anyone to suspect anything was wrong. And the timing, the precision of that warning, delivered just hours before catastrophe, defies any logical explanation. So we're forced to consider something that makes most people deeply uncomfortable, that there are patterns operating in reality that we don't understand, that information can travel through channels we haven't mapped, that some people, for reasons we can't explain, become conduits for warnings that save lives. Your experience isn't unique. It's part of a pattern that's been documented across cultures, across centuries, across every continent on Earth. Strangers delivering warnings about disasters they couldn't possibly know about. Messages that arrive through impossible channels. Premonitions that prove accurate with terrifying precision. In 1966, a school in Aberfan, Wales was buried under a collapsing coal waste tip. 144 people died, most of them children. In the weeks before the disaster, multiple people reported dreams and premonitions of something terrible happening to the school. A 9-year-old girl told her mother she'd dreamed of something black covering the school. She died in the disaster 2 weeks later. Before the Titanic sank in 1912, booking cancellations spiked in ways that couldn't be explained by normal patterns. People reported feelings of dread, dreams of disaster, unexplainable urges to change their travel plans. Some listened. They survived. In Japan, before the 2011 tsunami, there are documented cases of people experiencing overwhelming compulsions to leave coastal areas, to move to higher ground, hours before any warning systems detected the earthquake. Strangers approached strangers with urgent messages to evacuate. Messages that seemed crazy at the time, but proved life-saving minutes later. These aren't isolated incidents. They're data points in a larger pattern that suggests reality operates on frequencies we're only beginning to understand. The scientific community has started taking these phenomena seriously. Studies on precognition, on the ability of human consciousness to detect future events, have shown results that exceed chance at statistically significant levels. The research is controversial, absolutely. It challenges fundamental assumptions about how time and causality work, but the data keeps accumulating. People know things they shouldn't be able to know. They receive warnings about events that haven't happened yet. And sometimes those warnings come through the most unexpected channels. A homeless stranger on a street corner, a wrong number phone call that delivers a cryptic message, a dream so vivid it feels like a transmission, an overwhelming feeling that freezes you in place and keeps you from walking into disaster. What your homeless stranger did was tap into something that exists in all of us, but that most people have learned to ignore. An ability to perceive patterns before they fully manifest. To sense disruptions in the flow of events before they become visible to ordinary awareness. Some people are more sensitive to these patterns than others. People who live on society's margins, who aren't constantly distracted by the noise of modern life, often maintain connections to these subtle frequencies that others have lost. They become receivers, conduits, messengers. And sometimes they deliver warnings that defy all logical explanation but prove absolutely, undeniably true. Let's talk about what's actually happening when these impossible warnings occur. Because there's emerging science that suggests these experiences aren't supernatural. They're natural phenomena operating on principles we're only beginning to understand. Human consciousness isn't confined to the physical brain. This is no longer fringe science. It's supported by decades of research into quantum mechanics, field theories of consciousness, and the documented phenomenon of non-local awareness. Your brain generates an electromagnetic field that extends beyond your skull. That field interacts with other fields, other consciousness, other patterns of energy, in ways we're mapping but don't fully comprehend yet. When someone is about to experience a major life event, especially a life-threatening one, their energy field begins to shift in detectable ways. Studies using advanced sensors have measured these shifts hours, sometimes days before the event occurs. It's as if the future casts a shadow backward through time, a resonance that sensitive individuals can perceive. Your homeless stranger was likely one of these sensitive individuals, someone whose nervous system, for whatever reason, genetics, life circumstances, neurological differences, was tuned to frequencies most people filter out. He detected the pattern disruption that was building around you, the energetic signature of imminent catastrophe. This isn't mystical, it's physics we're still learning to measure. Think about how animals behave before earthquakes. They detect seismic activity through sensory channels humans don't consciously access. They respond to information that's present in the environment but invisible to standard human perception. Now extend that principle to human consciousness. Some people retain or develop heightened sensitivity to pattern disruptions in the energetic environment. They feel when something is wrong, when danger is approaching, when the normal flow of events is about to break. And sometimes they feel compelled to act on that information, to deliver warnings to people they don't know, driven by an impulse they can't fully explain. The mechanism might involve quantum entanglement, where particles that have interacted remain connected regardless of distance. Your consciousness, having existed in proximity to your apartment, to that building, to the electrical system that was failing, was entangled with those elements. The pattern of that failure was accessible to consciousness sensitive enough to perceive it. Your homeless stranger picked up on that signal. He didn't know the details. He didn't know about electrical wiring or fire codes. He just knew, with absolute certainty, that you shouldn't go home that night. The information arrived in his awareness as a complete knowing, bypassing rational thought and demanding immediate action. This is how real intuition works. Not as vague feelings or wishful thinking, but as precise information that arrives through non-ordinary channels. Information that proves accurate despite having no logical source. The challenge is that most people have been trained to dismiss these signals, to override them with rational thinking that insists such knowing is impossible. But the people who survive impossible situations often share a common trait. They listened to the signal, even when it made no logical sense. They trusted the knowing even when they couldn't explain it. They let the impossible information guide their actions, and they lived because of it. After an experience like yours, after being saved by an impossible warning, something fundamental shifts in how you perceive reality. The neat categories that organize most people's understanding of the world, the clear boundaries between possible and impossible, between rational and irrational, those boundaries dissolve. You're left standing in a new territory, where certainty is no longer available, where the mechanics of existence operate on principles you can feel but can't fully explain. This territory is uncomfortable. It's destabilizing. But it's also more truthful than the simplified version of reality most people accept without question. You find yourself paying attention to things you would have dismissed before. That subtle feeling of unease before getting in a car with someone. That unexplainable urge to take a different route home. That dream that feels more like a message than a random firing of neurons. You're not becoming paranoid or superstitious. You're becoming attuned. You're learning to recognize the signals that have always been present, but that you were trained to ignore. This attunement comes with challenges. Other people don't understand. When you cancel plans because something feels wrong, they think you're being flaky. When you try to explain what happened to you, how a stranger saved your life with impossible knowledge, you see skepticism in their eyes. Doubt. The unspoken suggestion that you're misremembering, exaggerating, or interpreting a coincidence as something more meaningful. But you know what you experienced. You know that man knew something he couldn't have known through normal channels. You know that listening to him saved your life. And once you've had that experience, once you've seen proof that reality operates on principles beyond standard explanation, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to the comfortable certainty that most people wrap themselves in. You're awake in a way that's both gift and burden. You see patterns others miss. You receive signals others dismiss, and you carry the responsibility of honoring that sensitivity, of trusting it even when it contradicts logic. Many people who have experiences like yours report similar aftermath patterns. They become more cautious, yes, but also more present, more aware of the subtle currents flowing beneath surface reality. They develop what might be called survival intuition, a heightened ability to sense when something is off, when danger is near, when the ordinary flow of events is about to break. This isn't anxiety. Anxiety is fear without a specific target, a generalized dread that attaches to everything. This is different. This is precise knowing, directed at specific situations. The difference is crucial. Anxiety paralyzes. Intuition guides. Anxiety creates false alarms. Intuition delivers accurate information that saves lives. The question that haunts you most isn't about the fire. It's about him. The homeless stranger who knew. Who was he? Where did he come from? Why did he choose that moment to deliver that warning? And where did he disappear to? You've considered every possible explanation. That he was a former tenant who knew about electrical problems in the building. But the building manager confirmed no one matching his description ever lived there, that he was a city inspector who'd noticed violations. But there were no inspection records. No reports filed, no official acknowledgement of any problems prior to the fire. That he was someone you'd met before and forgotten, but you never forget a face. And his face, those clear eyes, that specific intensity you'd never seen before that night. The most unsettling possibility is the one you keep circling back to. That he appeared specifically for you. That somehow, through mechanisms that operate outside normal causality, he was there at that exact moment to deliver that exact warning, because that's what needed to happen for you to survive. This suggestion raises questions that shatter comfortable assumptions about how reality works. It implies intelligence in the universe, not consciousness in the traditional sense, but pattern intelligence. A self-organizing principle that maintains balance. That prevents certain outcomes, that guides certain people to certain places at certain times. It implies your life has significance beyond what you can see, that your continued existence serves purposes you might not understand yet, but that are important enough for reality itself to intervene. Some spiritual traditions would call him a guardian. Others would say he was an agent of fate, a human instrument used by larger forces to maintain balance in the pattern. Still others would insist he was simply a man with heightened intuitive abilities who felt compelled to act on information his consciousness received. All of these explanations point toward the same underlying truth. Reality is far more interconnected, far more responsive, far more alive than standard materialism allows. The boundaries between separate selves aren't as solid as they appear. Information flows between consciousness in ways we're only beginning to map, and sometimes that flow manifests as warnings delivered by strangers. You've thought about finding him, hiring investigators, posting on social media, dedicating real resources to tracking down this person who saved your life, but something stops you each time. A feeling that finding him would somehow break the pattern, that his anonymity is part of what made the warning work, that he appeared as an agent of necessity and disappeared because his role was complete. This might sound like rationalization, like making peace with mystery because solution isn't available. But it might also be true. Some interventions work precisely because they come from unexpected sources, because they break through the filters and defenses that would dismiss a warning from someone you know or from an obvious authority figure. The fire didn't just destroy your apartment. It transformed your entire life trajectory. The insurance payout wasn't enough to cover everything you lost, so you had to make hard choices about what to rebuild and what to release. Photographs, heirlooms, collections you'd spent years assembling, all gone. But here's what you discovered in the aftermath. Most of what burned didn't actually matter. The things you thought were essential to your identity, to your happiness, turned out to be weight you didn't need to carry. The fire, as devastating as it was, became an accidental purge, a forced simplification. And in that simplified space, you found clarity you'd been missing for years. You changed careers. The job you'd been grinding away at before the fire, the one that was slowly draining your enthusiasm for life, you walked away from it. The near-death experience gave you permission to prioritize differently, to ask bigger questions about how you wanted to spend your remaining time on this planet. You moved to a different city, started projects you'd been postponing, connected with people you'd been meaning to reach out to. The warning didn't just save your life, it woke you up. It shook you out of the passive drift that most people mistake for living and thrust you into active participation in your own existence. And you became a messenger yourself, not in the same dramatic way that Homeless Stranger was for you, but in smaller, consistent ways. You started trusting your intuition about other people. When you felt compelled to reach out to someone you hadn't spoken to in years, you did it. Often, you discovered they were going through something difficult, and your message arrived exactly when they needed support. When you felt resistance to a situation that seemed perfectly fine on the surface, you honored that resistance. More than once, doing so kept you out of harmful situations that revealed their true nature only after you'd safely stepped away. You became sensitive to patterns in ways that served not just your survival, but your growth and the well-being of people around you. The Homeless Stranger's warning created ripples that extended far beyond that single night. It changed how you move through the world. It changed what you pay attention to. It changed your relationship with uncertainty and mystery. Most people live as if reality is a closed system, operating on fully understood principles where everything can be explained and predicted. You now live with the knowledge that reality is an open system, responsive and alive, full of patterns we're still learning to perceive. This knowledge makes you more flexible, more humble, more attentive. It makes you a better version of yourself. Not because you're afraid of missing warnings, but because you're tuned to frequencies that guide toward better outcomes. Since sharing your story more publicly, you've been contacted by dozens of people with similar experiences. a woman in Ohio who was told by a stranger at a gas station not to take the highway. She took back roads instead. A massive pileup occurred on the highway exactly where she would have been. A man in Australia who received a call from an unknown number telling him to leave his office building immediately. He did. A structural failure caused partial collapse 20 minutes later. A teenager in Canada who had a dream about her best friend drowning. She convinced her friend to skip a beach trip. Another person from their group drowned that day. The stories keep coming. Each one follows similar patterns. Impossible information, delivered through unexpected channels, proving accurate in ways that save lives. What becomes clear from collecting these accounts is that this phenomenon isn't rare. It's happening constantly, all over the world, to people from every background and belief system. The difference is that most people dismiss it. They explain it away. They're so committed to a worldview that insists such things don't happen that they'll perform incredible mental gymnastics to avoid accepting what they experience. This denial serves a function. It maintains comfortable certainty. It keeps the world feeling predictable and safe. But it also cuts people off from information that could save their lives. It dulls sensitivity to patterns that could guide better decisions. It leaves people vulnerable to disasters they might have been able to avoid if they'd been willing to trust signals that defied logical explanation. The people who survive impossible situations often share a common trait. They're willing to look foolish. They're willing to change plans based on information they can't fully justify. They're willing to trust, knowing that arrives without proof. This willingness doesn't make them gullible or superstitious. It makes them adaptive. It gives them access to a broader range of information than people who only trust what can be rationally explained. In a complex, unpredictable world, this adaptability is a survival advantage. The universe appears to operate with a kind of built-in safety mechanism. When someone is heading toward disaster, when their path is about to intersect with catastrophic harm, signals are sent, warnings are delivered. The mechanism through which this happens is still being understood, but the pattern is undeniable. Sometimes the warnings come through dreams, sometimes through intuition, a feeling in your body that something is wrong, sometimes through synchronicity, a series of delays or obstacles that keep you from being where danger is waiting, and sometimes, as in your case, through another human being who serves as a conduit for information they shouldn't logically possess. These warnings aren't guaranteed. They don't always arrive, and they don't always get heard or heeded. But they happen often enough to suggest that reality has a responsive quality to it. That consciousness interacts with events in ways that can shift outcomes. That information can flow backward through time or across distances in ways that violate standard understanding, but that prove accurate nonetheless. You can develop sensitivity to these signals. It's not about becoming psychic or developing supernatural powers. It's about removing the interference that blocks natural perceptual abilities most humans possess but have learned to ignore. Start by paying attention to your body. Your nervous system processes information before your conscious mind does. That feeling in your gut, that tension in your shoulders, that sudden fatigue or surge of energy, these are information signals. Not random, not meaningless. Your body is responding to patterns in the environment that your conscious awareness hasn't yet identified. Learn to trust those signals without needing to immediately explain them. Practice with small decisions first. When you're deciding which route to take home, which coffee shop to stop at, which friend to call, pause before defaulting to logic or habit. Feel into the options. Notice which one creates a sense of ease or expansion in your body. Notice which one creates contraction or resistance. Follow the ease, not always, not religiously, but often enough to start collecting data on whether your body's signals correlate with better outcomes. Most people discover they do. The route that felt right avoided unexpected traffic. The coffee shop you chose happened to be hosting someone you needed to meet. The friend you called was exactly the person who could help with a problem you hadn't mentioned yet. Reduce noise in your environment. Constant stimulation, endless scrolling, perpetual distraction, these block subtle perception. Your awareness gets saturated by loud, immediate signals and misses the quiet ones that carry more important information. Create regular periods of quiet. Not meditation necessarily, though that can help. Just time when you're not consuming content, not checking devices, not filling every moment with input. In that spaciousness, subtler signals become perceptible. Patterns you would have missed become obvious. Information that was always present becomes accessible. This isn't about withdrawing from life, it's about being more present to it, more attuned to the full range of information available to you. Connect with people who honor this sensitivity rather than dismiss it. This is crucial. If everyone around you insists that intuition is nonsense, that premonitions are superstition, that warnings from strangers are coincidence, you'll start doubting your own perceptions. You'll override signals that could save your life because the social cost of trusting them feels too high. Find at least a few people who understand that reality operates on principles beyond standard explanation, who have had their own experiences of impossible knowing, who can validate what you're perceiving without making you feel crazy. This support network becomes essential when you receive information that contradicts logic, but that you need to trust anyway. Through studying accounts of impossible warnings and near-miss disasters, certain patterns emerge, signals that consistently appear before catastrophic events. Learning to recognize these patterns doesn't guarantee you will avoid every disaster, but it increases your odds significantly. First pattern is the overwhelming urge to change plans. Not anxiety, not vague worry, but a specific, intense compulsion to not do something you were planning to do, to not take that flight, to not attend that event, to not go to that location. This urge often appears suddenly, without logical explanation, and feels almost physically compelling. When it shows up, honor it. Change the plans. The inconvenience of rearranging your schedule is nothing compared to the disaster you might be avoiding. Second pattern is repeated obstacles or delays. You're trying to get somewhere and everything goes wrong. Traffic is impossible. Your car won't start. You can't find your keys. Every possible obstacle appears to keep you from reaching your destination. Most people fight through this, determined to stick to their plans. But sometimes these obstacles are protective. They're keeping you out of synchronization with harm. Instead of fighting harder, consider that the universe might be trying to tell you something. If unusual numbers of obstacles appear, pause. Reassess whether this journey is one you actually need to make right now. Often, the people who survive disasters are the ones who missed their flight, who got delayed by inexplicable problems, who arrived late, and thus avoided being present when catastrophe struck. Third pattern is vivid, specific dreams that feel different from normal dreams. Not symbolic, not vague, but clear and detailed. Dreams that show you specific events, specific warnings, specific dangers. These dreams often have a quality that's hard to describe, but unmistakable when you experience it. They feel more real than reality. They stay with you after waking in ways normal dreams don't. They demand to be taken seriously. When you have this kind of dream, don't dismiss it. Write it down, share it with someone. Let it inform your choices, not with paranoia, but with healthy caution. Many disaster survivors report having warning dreams in the days or weeks before the event. The ones who survived are the ones who took the dream seriously enough to modify their behavior. Fourth pattern is sudden, unexpected messages from strangers or from people you haven't heard from in years. A wrong number call that delivers oddly specific advice. A social media message from someone you barely know, reaching out with information or warnings that seem to come from nowhere. An encounter on the street with someone who says something that strikes you as impossibly relevant to your current situation. These messages often feel random or coincidental, but pay attention to them. Sometimes information finds you through the path of least resistance. The stranger messaging you might be responding to their own intuitive hit without fully understanding why. Trust the message, even if you don't fully trust the messenger. Extract the information and let it inform your awareness. For decades, studying precognition was career-ending for serious scientists. The topic was considered pseudoscience, impossible by definition, not worthy of investigation. But that's changing. Rigorous research programs at credible institutions have been producing results that are impossible to dismiss. Dean Radin at the Institute of Noetic Sciences has conducted thousands of trials measuring physiological responses to future events. Participants are shown a series of images, some neutral, some emotionally arousing. The key finding is that their bodies respond measurably before the arousing images appear. Heart rate changes, skin conductance shifts, pupil dilation occurs, all before the stimulus is presented, before the participant could possibly know what's coming through normal sensory channels. This isn't happening to specially gifted people. It's happening to ordinary participants in controlled laboratory conditions. The effect size is small, but it's consistent and statistically significant. It suggests that human nervous systems have access to information about near-future events. That time, as we experience it, isn't as linear as we assume, that causality can operate in both directions. These findings align with physics research into quantum mechanics and the nature of time. The present moment isn't separate from future moments in the way everyday experience suggests. Information can flow across these temporal boundaries. Consciousness appears to exist in a kind of extended present that includes not just now, but near future and near past as well. Other research has focused on disaster premonitions, analyzing casualty patterns in accidents, plane crashes, building collapses, looking for statistical anomalies in who was present and who wasn't. What researchers find is that significantly fewer people are often present at disasters than would be expected by normal patterns. Booking cancellations for doomed flights exceed normal rates. Attendance at events that experience catastrophic accidents is unexpectedly low, as if people collectively sensed something wrong and made choices that kept them away. This isn't proof of individual precognition necessarily, but it suggests collective sensing of future danger. A distributed intelligence that shifts behavior in ways that reduce harm, even when individuals can't articulate why they're making different choices. The mechanisms are still being investigated. How does information about future events become available to present consciousness? Theories range from quantum entanglement across time to morphic fields that carry pattern information to retrocausal influences where future events influence past decisions. None of these explanations are fully satisfying yet. But what's becoming undeniable is that the phenomenon exists. People know things they shouldn't be able to know. They respond to information that hasn't arrived through normal channels. And sometimes, that impossible knowing saves lives. Your homeless stranger wasn't supernatural. He was operating on natural principles we're only beginning to understand. Principles that exist in all of us, but that most people have learned to ignore or dismiss. If you receive a warning, whether from a stranger, through a dream, through your own intuition, you face a choice that carries weight. Do you honor the information even though you can't explain it? Or do you dismiss it because it doesn't fit rational frameworks? This choice matters more than most people realize, not just for your own survival, but for the larger pattern. When warnings are received and dismissed repeatedly, the signal weakens. It's like ignoring someone who's trying to help you. Eventually they stop trying. The universe operates with similar responsiveness. When you consistently override intuitive information, when you refuse to trust signals that prove accurate, your access to those signals diminishes. Not as punishment, but as natural consequence. The channel atrophies from lack of use. But when you honor the warnings, when you make the difficult choice to trust impossible information, something shifts. Your sensitivity increases, signals become clearer, information arrives with greater frequency and precision. It's as if reality recognizes that you're paying attention and responds by providing more detailed guidance. This creates a feedback loop. The more you trust, the more trustworthy the information becomes. The more you act on subtle signals, the more obvious those signals become. You develop a relationship with something larger than yourself. Call it intuition, call it the universe, call it the intelligence of interconnected consciousness. The name matters less than the recognition that this relationship exists and that it strengthens with use. You also carry responsibility toward others. If you receive information about someone else's danger, you face an ethical dilemma. Do you tell them, risk looking foolish, potentially save their life at the cost of your social credibility? There's no universal right answer, but consider this. That homeless stranger could have walked past you. He could have kept his knowing to himself, avoided the awkwardness of grabbing a stranger's wrist and delivering a warning that made no logical sense, but he didn't. He chose to act. He chose to risk looking unstable or threatening to deliver information that proved life-saving. That choice matters. Your life exists because he made it. If you receive information about someone else's danger, seriously consider following his example. The delivery matters as much as the message. You don't need to explain the cosmic mechanics of how you know. You don't need to convince them you're psychic or special. Keep it simple. Keep it grounded. I have a strong feeling you shouldn't take that trip. Something about this situation doesn't feel right to me. I had a dream that stuck with me and I feel like I need to mention it. Give them the information and let them decide what to do with it. You've fulfilled your responsibility by delivering the warning. Whether they heed it isn't your burden to carry, but the attempt, the willingness to risk social awkwardness to potentially prevent harm, that's the practice. That's how these patterns work through human consciousness. One person receiving information, choosing to trust it enough to act, passing it forward to someone else who needs it. Years after the fire, after the impossible warning, after your life rebuilt itself in new forms, the central mystery remains. You still don't know how he knew. You've studied the research, explored the theories, considered every possible explanation, but none of them feel complete. None of them capture the fullness of what happened that night on a street corner, when a stranger grabbed your wrist and saved your life. And maybe that's appropriate. Maybe some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Maybe the point isn't understanding every mechanism, but learning to function effectively inside a reality that's more mysterious than you were taught. The dominant culture insists on certainty, on explanations, on reducing everything to mechanisms that can be fully mapped and predicted. But reality doesn't cooperate with that insistence. There are patterns operating that we can perceive, but not fully explain, connections between things that appear separate, information flows that violate standard models of causation. Living well doesn't require understanding all of this completely. It requires developing comfort with mystery, learning to act on information even when you can't justify where it came from, trusting patterns you can feel but can't prove. This isn't abandoning reason. It's expanding beyond the limitations of narrow rationality to include forms of knowing that access different kinds of truth. Your life became richer when you stopped needing to explain everything, when you accepted that you live in a responsive universe that sometimes sends signals through unexpected channels, when you learned to trust the impossible warnings that arrive in forms ranging from subtle intuition to dramatic interventions by mysterious strangers. This acceptance doesn't make you gullible. It makes you adaptive. It gives you access to a broader range of information than people who only trust what can be rationally justified. In a complex, unpredictable world, this adaptability is an advantage. The people who survive the unsurvivable often share this quality. They trust what they know, even when they can't explain how they know it. The mystery of your homeless stranger, of how he knew what he knew, remains unsolved. But the impact of his warning continues to shape your life. You're more present, more attentive, more willing to trust signals that don't come with explanations, more willing to be the messenger when information arrives that someone else needs. The mystery doesn't need solving. It needs honoring. It needs to be recognized as part of a larger pattern of intelligence operating through reality, connecting consciousness across apparent boundaries, delivering warnings that save lives through channels that defy conventional understanding. You're alive because that pattern found a way to reach you. That's what matters. That's what transforms everything. If you made it this far, if this message found you, there's a reason. Maybe you've experienced your own impossible warning. Maybe you ignored signals you shouldn't have ignored, and you're here because you survived despite that mistake. Maybe you're being prepared to receive a warning in the future, and this information will help you recognize it when it arrives. Whatever brought you here, pay attention to what you're feeling right now. That resonance in your chest, that heightened awareness, that sense of something clicking into place. That's recognition. That's your consciousness acknowledging patterns it's been sensing but hasn't had language for until now. You're not crazy for trusting your intuition. You're not foolish for changing plans based on feelings you can't explain. You're not weird for paying attention to dreams, synchronicities, warnings from strangers. You're awake. You're tuned to frequencies most people filter out, and that attunement isn't random. It's necessary for what's ahead. The world is becoming more complex, more unpredictable, more volatile. The systems that gave our grandparents stability are breaking down. The future is less certain than it's been in generations. In this environment, the ability to sense danger before it becomes obvious, to trust warnings that arrive through unconventional channels, to act on information you can't fully justify, these abilities become survival skills. You're developing them now. You're learning to navigate reality as it actually is, rather than as you were taught it should be. That learning curve is uncomfortable, but it's essential. The people who make it through what's coming will be the ones who could read the signals everyone else missed. Your life continuing means something. The universe went out of its way to keep you here. That homeless stranger appeared exactly when needed to deliver information that preserved your existence. That intervention wasn't random. It wasn't lucky. It was necessary. You have something left to do. Maybe you don't know what it is yet. Maybe it will reveal itself slowly over years. But trust that your survival serves purposes beyond your current understanding. Live like you're supposed to be here, because you are. Against odds that should have claimed you, you're still here. Honor that. Use it. Become the person that impossible intervention was protecting. Become the messenger for someone else when it's your turn to deliver warnings that make no logical sense, but that might save a life. Thank you for being here. Thank you for reading this far. Thank you for being willing to consider that reality operates on principles beyond standard explanation. If this message resonated, if you've experienced impossible warnings yourself, type "awakened" in the comments. Not for the algorithm, though that helps. Do it as acknowledgement, as recognition of the larger pattern we're all part of, as confirmation that you're paying attention to signals most people miss. You're not alone in this. There are others who see what you see, who trust what you trust, who navigate by patterns invisible to standard awareness. Find them, connect with them, support each other in trusting the impossible, knowing that arrives when you need it most. Your life might depend on it. And remember, the next time a stranger delivers a warning that makes no logical sense, or your gut screams at you to change plans, or a dream won't leave you alone, trust it. Honor it. Act on it. That's how you stay alive when reality breaks its rules to keep you here.